Welcome into the Dynasty After Party. My name is Michael Sicoli. We are back better than ever, myself and Joel, diving into a few new coaching hires, as well as, just like we've been doing, our Dynasty wide receiver tiers, brought to you by Joel through an amazing article at clubfantasyffl.com. We're going to be diving into those wide receiver tiers. You guys like the running backs? You guys like the quarterbacks? We're going to be doing wide receivers next. And again, touching on some of those offensive coordinator hires, the head coaching hires, all that good stuff, plus answering your questions along the way if you have any. So, without further ado, let's jump right on into the show. And here we are, Joel. Here we are. There are good parts of this show that are going to happen. There are bad parts that are going to happen. There's a certain hiring that we hinted at last week's show.
We alluded to last week, yeah.
We alluded to last week that it might happen, and it happened. And for my Pittsburgh Steelers, it's going to be a very sad part of the show that we're going to talk about in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But first off, Joel, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. It's first Sunday without real football for, man, what's it been, like 4 or 5 months? This is awful. It's terrible. I think the reason the NFL does the 2-week gap between the championships and the Super Bowl is just to kind of, it's like methadone, right? It's to keep you from going into withdrawal too hard. So it's like we get the 1 week and then, all right, we get another game next week. That's when the void comes. So.
Are you telling me that Pro Bowl flag football doesn't count as a week of football for you?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Okay,
yes.
so that's what you're saying. Okay, so I was going to drop people on my tiers today based on how they did, but you're telling me not to do that.
So, yeah, unless you go like all Robert Edwards and tear up your knee in the sand, there's really no reason to adjust anything.
Oh, let's hope for none of that at least.
Yeah, I'm going to knock on wood here.
Yeah, knock on wood. Knock on wood. We have no Pro Bowl injuries ahead of the Super Bowl, which is going to be a doozy, and we'll be doing a show that Sunday as well. Possibly. I actually might be working that Sunday. Sad enough.
Uh-oh.
I know, but we'll talk about it off stream.
Work on Super Bowl Sunday? That's unheard of.
I know. Shame on the Catholic leagues of Long Island for having wrestling finals on Super Bowl Sunday. I know, but
don't they have a calendar?
What?
Don't they have a calendar?
They clearly do not. Not in the CHSAA, apparently. But that's for another time. That's for another show. That's a hurdle to cross at a different time. But for now, let's start off with some of our headliner headlines of the week, and really focusing on the coaching. That's what we've been talking about the last few weeks, and there are plenty to take note of. Starting with those head coaching positions, Dan Quinn is now the new head coach of the Washington Commanders after Ben Johnson decided to stay another year in Detroit, which is a very interesting decision. Greg Roman goes to the Chargers as offensive coordinator. Mike McDonald becomes the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Arthur Smith, as what we alluded to before, now has a position with the Steelers. And Cliff Kingsbury backs out of Las Vegas job, which we'll talk about all of that. But let's start with Dan Quinn because I don't want to start with Arthur Smith. Defensive hire, safe hire, not what they were trying to do with this new organization.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people kind of dumping on this hire. I think it's a good hire. I think he was good at Atlanta, right? He took them to a Super Bowl. It just, they didn't win. It just kind of went south from there. I think he'll be fine. He's a competent coach. If I was a Commander fan, would I have rather had Ben Johnson? Yeah. As a Packer fan, would I have rather Ben Johnson left the Lions? Yeah. But I think Quinn will be fine. Now they're talking about Kingsbury taking that OC job.
Yeah,
this is bizarre.
Is one more appealing than the other? Did Cliff get in the Vegas building and be like, oh, I actually didn't know who the head coach was of Antonio Pierce and I don't work well? Like, it was a very weird news there, but we could talk about that as well of Cliff backing out and your boy Luke Getsy of the Chicago Bears walking in to become the new offensive coordinator of the Vegas Raiders. And it's an important position, right? Because we have Antonio Pierce, a defensive-minded head coach. We expect him to focus more on that side of the ball. He already is a new head coach at that. So you are giving a lot of trust to Luke Getsy, who, well, that's a very questionable year in Chicago at times.
questionable a couple of years, right? It was
Probably multiple years. Yeah, 2
I
years.
mean, this feels like almost like the Aaron Rodgers effect. I mean, I hear you hear these tweets from these insiders saying he's well respected around league circles. Why? Other than him being tight with Aaron Rodgers, what is he? I mean, he was Aaron Rodgers' quarterback coach. He wasn't a coordinator until he went to the Bears, and they haven't done anything substantial in the 2 years he was there. So I don't get the supposed love for him around the league. It really doesn't make sense. I think he's kind of the Nathaniel Hackett Jr. really.
Oh, let's not go that far. That's a little bit too far for me still. But I do think it'll be interesting to see who they pair with this offseason. Obviously, this is a very interesting one for the Vegas, for the Raiders in general, because we don't know who the quarterback is. What do they do with Josh Jacobs? How do they address the defensive side of the ball again? They have a lot of people leaving. It's interesting. And will they be able to progress Tyree Wilson, who was a disappointment in his rookie season? So a lot of things to watch for in Vegas. But Greg Roman to the Chargers, we were talking about briefly before the show. This hire, I think, is the most fancy relevant of the four we talk about here. Possibly. Maybe we can make an argument for this guy. But Greg Roman to the Chargers was a very interesting spot for a somewhat run-heavy type of coach, and not one that really you would expect to pair with Justin Herbert and Harbaugh.
It's just kind of terrifying, right?
Terrifying. It is.
Like, as someone who's got a lot of Herbert shares and like gave up Jordan Love to get Justin Herbert in one league during the playoffs. I don't like this at all. Like Harbaugh and that's a terrifying fantasy. Like this is scarier than Arthur Smith going to Pittsburgh. This is way worse.
And that's because it's two people with the same mindset, right? You look at Greg Roman. I'm pulling it up right now. Number 2 in rushing offense.
They don't have the defense to support it. I mean,
that's
a mess.
Weird. Yeah, it's a Baltimore philosophy with a Chargers defense, and that just
exactly.
It feels like. I mean, they're going to have, the whole focus of this new regime has to be overhauling the defense to begin with. It was historically bad. So you imagine they are going to address that to some extent, but will they be able to do it for 2024? I mean, Greg Roman's passing offenses, he hasn't had a top 10 passing offense in yards ever. He had the one passing touchdown year where he finished number 1 when Lamar was MVP. But aside from that, outside the top 10 in yards, touchdowns, attempts, always bottom. And you could definitely point some of that to Lamar Jackson, but he was the same way in Buffalo and the same way in San Francisco as well. So you have a very run-heavy approach with a quarterback that we know can air it out. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see how this is going to work out, but I'm also terrified, just like you are, of what this could mean for fantasy.
Did he get fired in Baltimore or did he leave on his own? Did he resign? I don't remember.
I think he resigned. Let me.
You said that's got to be awkward going from one brother to the other.
Yeah, that is also a very funny point.
But, I know he's got like Michigan ties and all that, but
he took 2023 off by his own accord.
Okay,
and then Lamar Jackson proceeded to have an MVP year without him.
I took a season off.
That's such a. Like, how does that – I know it's the brother connection that's really making this move, but, like, how does that work where you take a year off after a down year and then your quarterback is an MVP season without you, and then you just move on like nothing happened, right? Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, that's strange to me. But, hey, listen, Harbaugh's going to the NFL. And let's just – let's go Mike McDonald to the Seahawks as a defensive hire. The staff has not been equipped yet. I like this quite a bit, actually. I think it's awesome to see a bright young defensive mind being paired with Pete Carroll, who is still in the office in Seattle. I'm hoping that could be a nice little foster relationship, that they could work together to some degree, and also just grow. I mean, Mike McDonald had a fantastic season with Baltimore, number 1 defense in most metrics. So, I'm excited for that, but we have to see how that staff rounds out for offensive fantasy purposes, at least.
Kind of a Tomlin-esque hire, right? Super young guy, had 1 year as a coordinator that went very, very well, and then gets a head coaching job. Not that it's not deserved. And obviously it's been really good for your team and for Mike Tomlin. It's been there, 17 years? That's crazy.
Yeah. And also the note of this is another organization like the Steelers that has shown a lot of patience with Pete Carroll in recent years,
Yeah.
and is willing to give their coaches a longer rope. So another Tomlin connection there.
Yeah, like you said, this is going to be, fantasy-wise, this really depends on who they get to be their coordinator, because he is a defensive coach. So be very interested. There's a lot of talent there, so be very interesting to see, who they hire to be their coordinator.
Yep, defensive fantasy production on all levels of the field there for Baltimore, but had a lot of good pieces for that. Also, let's go to the last one here. If you can't tell, Joel, I was putting this off. Arthur Smith is the new offensive coordinator for the Steelers. We got an alert on last week's show, which be sure to check out last week's running back tiers show. I saw the report that they were interviewing him, and I crumbled for the rest of last week's show. And it feels worse now that it's actually done, and he is now the head coach of. It's such a cruel joke, Joel. It's such
he's the head coach of the offense. He's not the head coach.
It's such a joke of Tomlin. For the first time, he hires out of house. Good. Everyone's asking him to hire out of house. Go with a different philosophy. And then he brings in a guy who has the exact same philosophy of an old-fashioned run the ball. We're going to see Najee Harris and Jalen Warren carry the ball 40 times with Broderick freaking Jones pulling out. I don't like this for fantasy.
All right, glass half full. What if, like we've been saying basically the entire season, that when he was in Atlanta, that they should trade for Justin Fields. You've been in favor of trading for Justin Fields for Pittsburgh.
Yes.
When Arthur Smith had a competent quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, who's and Justin Fields is much better than Ryan Tannehill. He just is, right? For all the concerns about him, he's just a better player than Ryan Tannehill. What if they trade for Justin Fields? Does that make you feel better?
I have no faith in them to develop him. I have just no faith in him to use him right. And in theory, it should fit, right? Arthur Smith's scheme is very well paired for a play action mobile quarterback to, you fake the handoff
RPO,
and you go.
Very RPO heavy.
Yeah, RPO heavy and using Justin Fields' arm to his strength. And it should work, but I have no faith in Arthur Smith. I just don't. I can't watch what happened in Atlanta happen in Pittsburgh. And it was so unwatchable this season. And I know Desmond Ritter's terrible. I know that. I know Justin Fields is 10 times better than him. But I'm broken, man. I am so broken. I just don't. I don't. We haven't seen him really develop anyone. Tannehill was an established product when he got to Tennessee, and sure, you enjoyed a brief revival of being better in the first few years of Tennessee than you ever was in Miami. But I just have the question marks of how long will George Pickens stand Arthur Smith? How long will this team stand Arthur Smith if they struggle? And they will struggle. It's a new scheme and an outside hire and a big personality of a coordinator. But at least by what we've seen, he feels very confident in himself despite not really have accomplished much. So I think it's all going to explode at some point. Ryan points out in our chat, knowing Smith, they'll trade for Fields and throw 650 times. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's when they'll start throwing deep to Pickens, except they won't be setting up pass protection. And he'll just get rocketed, and then he'll get hurt, and then everything's terrible, and the Steelers go 9-8 somehow. So yeah, that's my bit.
They will. They're going to finish above.
No, I know. That's why I didn't say 6-10 or 6-11, whatever it is nowadays. I said 9-8. But yeah, that's all I got on this one. It's more than enough that more than what I want to talk about on this front for Mr. Smith. But let's move on to something more joyful, more happy. And that's Dynasty wide receiver tiers. You, once again, Joel, outdid yourself with a fantastic Dynasty wide receiver article, which you can check out at clubfantasyffl.com. Again, for you to check out, be sure to do so. Be even better to follow along as you listen to this, I would even say. So without further ado, let's jump into tier 1 here. And Joel, I'll let you start it off. The heavyweights, the super heavyweights, tier 1 wide receivers, you got 4 right here.
Yeah, so I noted that the quarterback top tier is the exact same as 2023. Wide receivers, the elite tier was Jefferson and Chase last year. Now I think CeeDee Lamb belongs in this class or in this tier, and I think that Marvin Harrison is going to be valued highly enough to be in this tier, right? So like Harrison is like I said in the end, he's the platonic ideal of a wide receiver, like size, athleticism, ability, route running, just sheer physicality, with the bloodlines. Obviously he's a football rat. So there's almost no, I hesitate to say this, but there's almost no downside, right? I've seen people say he's the best prospect since Jamar Chase. I think he's a better prospect than that. I think you have to go back to at least Calvin Johnson. And Calvin Johnson turned out pretty good, right? So I think he's that caliber of player. So yeah, I think he's going to be valued highly enough to just immediately walk into this tier.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem with putting him this high. I think, with Chase, we at least had somewhat of the question of he sat out his last year. What does that look like?
But that was the only question, right?
Yeah, that was really the only question. It was a great prospect, obviously. Yeah. And then you also had in a similar way to this class, you had a very dominant Devonta Smith next to him, who has turned into a very good NFL wide receiver. And you have the same thing with Malik Neighbors potentially. Now, I'm curious because a lot of people are, and I think it's just to be contrarian, but a lot of people are saying Malik Neighbors is in that same tier as Marvin Harrison, or not nearly as far behind as you think. This isn't about the rookies necessarily, this show, but briefly, do you think there's a significant gap between the two?
I think there will be a significant value gap between the two, yes. We'll get to this when we talk about the rookie wide receivers.
Right.
It's a terrible year to be Romeo Doubs or Malik Neighbors, right? Because they would be the best, individually would be the best prospect in the last few years, right? Even 22, which was such a great class, clearly they would have been the best prospect last year's, but they're going to sit behind Marvin Harrison's. I like Malik Neighbors a lot. I think he's going to be I think that 105, 106 pick is exceptionally valuable because if with the quarterbacks and Harrison, like that 105, even in this very high tight end premium where you're going to include Brock Bowers, that 5.6 is very valuable. So basically anyone who didn't make the playoffs in a 12-team league is going to get a really elite player this year. So,
yeah.
So real quick, I got a trade offer for Jamar Chase. I want to get your
let's hear
opinion on. I was offered Chase for the 103 and the 104.
Mm-hmm. Superflex, I assume?
Superflex, non-tight end premium.
Non-tight end premium.
12 teams.
Oh, man. So, and this ties in well with the question that Ryan threw in the chat here of, in a Superflex, decent but not great at quarterback, he has the 101. Would you take Marvin Harrison, the rookie QB one? Because obviously you are losing, if you're getting the 103, you are losing either Caleb or you're losing Marvin Harrison. Those are the 1 and 2 locked in. Man, I think it really depends on where my team's at. I think if I need that, if I need to double my odds at landing a star, I think I'll take the picks. But if I'm relatively close to competing, I think I'll just hold on to Chase. And
so I also have the 107 in this league.
Okay.
It's the team that did not make the playoffs, but I looked at the two teams that are at the 101 and 102. Now, obviously that can change. Those picks can get traded. It's a long time till the draft, but they both look like they need quarterbacks. So I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that Harrison is there at the 103. I think Harrison is close enough to Chase that I'm not giving up the 104 to make that deal.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how high do you view Jaden Daniels, right? Because I think that would be most likely the person that would be going at 2, or you either be losing out Jaden Daniels to get Marvin Harrison, or you would be getting Jaden Daniels, right? So if you like,
we're going to have to see draft capital, landing spot. That's all going to be important. But
yeah, of course. But
to answer Ryan's question,
yeah,
if I have quarterbacks, like if I'm okay at quarterback, I'm taking Harrison 101.
As am I.
I think he's a better prospect overall than Caleb Williams. I think he's a better prospect than May or Daniels, pretty clearly.
He's the best prospect in this draft.
Yes, he is. So like the quarterback is going to have exceptional like in a single quarterback, Harrison goes like he's the 101 with a bullet, right? It's not even close.
Yeah.
Neighbors is the 102 with a bullet, and then Odunze on from there. In a super flex, even with the value, like unless you're like super desperate at quarterback, I'm taking Harrison at the 101.
I think I need to be super deep at quarterback is the alternative of I need to feel so confident in my quarterback positions to just pass up on it. Listen, I love Marvin Harrison, and I will have no issues with taking 101 at all. But it is reminiscent of years past where people overthink the position players a little bit, and then they don't take the quarterback 101, and we regret that down the line.
Well,
Now,
and let's go back.
So that helps.
Let's go back to 2021, where Trevor Lawrence was the almost unanimous 101. Would you rather have Jamar Chase right now or Trevor Lawrence?
And that's a good point. That's a good point as well. I was thinking of I think it was the what was the N'Keal Harry year? that year I was thinking
N'Keal Harry, Josh Jacobs season.
Yeah,
that was
that year. But
18, 17? No, that was been 17
like
or 19. I don't know.
18
matter. Is the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson year.
But yeah, long
17
story
was McCaffrey. It must have been 19, right?
It must have been 19 because it wasn't that long ago. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 19. But regardless, I probably in a vacuum will take Marvin Harrison. When I look at my dynasty drafts, I almost always exclusively just draft best player available with rookie drafts, that is. And that normally means Marvin Harrison. But if you're thin at quarterback, I would take Caleb. To me, it's that simple.
Yeah, you get the screaming upside with Caleb, but I mean, there's a floor question too, right?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think Andrew. He's not. I don't think he's the best product since Andrew Luck. I honestly think Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect, but that's just me.
I think Lawrence is a safer prospect.
Safer, yes, for sure. Let's jump over to tier 2 here. The elite. Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions, Puka Nacua of the Rams, Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, and A.J. Brown with Philly. Like you say, all these guys could be tier 1. We're putting him in. You're putting him in tier 2 just because we can't have 10 people in tier 1. I guess.
Pretty like I could see the case for making Amon-Ra in putting Amon-Ra in the tier 1. I think if you put him in tier 1, he would be pretty obviously the worst one. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's kind of safer to put him in this tier.
Yeah.
Like AJ Brown was in tier 1 at times, like the first 10 weeks of the season before Philly fell apart. He was in tier 1.
And then
Tyreek was in tier 1 for most of the season until the ankle injury kind of killed his numbers at the end of the year. Puka is going to be interesting, right? I think there's still people who don't believe.
Those people are insane.
I agree, but I've heard the chatter that he does not belong. Like he's not a top 10 redraft pick next year.
Yeah. Out of these 4 names, this is the one that if we were to get a bunch of comments of hate, this would probably be the one where people would say, "Oh, you're way too high on Puka." He just had the best rookie season of all time, and then dominated in the first round of the playoffs, and almost single-handedly brought the Rams over the Lions, who went to the NFC Championship. Like. He's great, man. He's just great.
Yeah. I mean, his target numbers are absurd. It's crazy. So, I mean, even when Kupp came back, he was clearly the number 1 target in that offense. So we've talked about this ad nauseum. I'm completely sold on him as a top 6, top 8 dynasty receiver. I think he absolutely belongs. Kicking myself in the spots where I had a chance to trade a first round pick for him. Very, very like the first couple of weeks of the season and didn't do it. We talked about that. So, these guys, like I said, any given season, any given Sunday, these guys could be in the top tier. But just value wise, I think they belong in a tier below that top tier guys.
Yeah, on a weekly basis, they probably have a higher chance than the tier 1 guys to fall into tier 3. And that's not a bad thing, but they just have that slightly higher chance. I want to quickly point out Ryan's comment saying that he appreciates the confirmation bias by, quote, "those smarter than me." His words, not ours, but just wanted to get that on record that Joel and I are smarter than Ryan, I guess, his words, But
is Ryan day drinking today?
Apparently. This is what happens when we have no football on Sunday, although I guess that happens with football on Sundays anyway. But either way, the one other name I want to bring up in this tier, because we don't need to spend too much time on these grades, Tyreek Hill is obviously the standout name here of older than the rest. All those other guys are fresh on their second contract or on the rookie deals. And Tyreek Hill is the 29 to be 30-year-old receiver with a quarterback that has question marks of his future. should be back, will be back next year, but who knows beyond, and who knows about Tyreek beyond. We've already heard him talk about retirement in past off seasons. We're sure we're going to hear some rumblings again. He's obviously still at the top of his game, but is there any worry when you're on the clock and picking Tyreek Hill in that second, third round of startups?
No. And we kind of talked about this with Christian McCaffrey last week, right? If you say you're playing in 2 to 3 year windows and don't think Tyreek Hill belongs in this tier, then you're lying to yourself, because he's going to be elite for the next 2 years. I have no doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay. That's the exact answer I was hoping you'd give, and the exact right answer, in my opinion. Let's move on to tier 3, the really good, not elite tier. Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, that hurts, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle. As you say, a.k.a. the elite 1B tier. I'll let you start off.
So, yeah, other than DJ Moore, these guys all have like very highly thought of running mates, right? Ayuk's got Debo, Nico's got Tank Dell, DK Metcalf's got Tyler Lockett. We'll get to later. I think he's going to be a cut candidate, so I don't think he'll be there, but he'll have JSN still. Devonta's got AJ Brown in the tier above him. Waddle's got Hill in the tier above him. This is the tier that I think you're going to see a lot of trade packages built off of, because they all have kind of enough name cachet that you could get up a tier, maybe 2, but none of them have like the consistent value or consistent scoring production, elite scoring production that you would be afraid to tear down to a younger guy like a Tank Dell or a Jaden Reed or something like that. You could see moving off of these guys for someone young, Rashee Rice, something like that. So I like, these are the guys your package deals are going to be built around.
Now, the one thing I wanted to talk about here, there's so many interesting names in this list here, but Nico Collins enjoying a terrific third-year breakout season, which 10 years ago would have been the norm of breaking out in your third year, and now it's behind the curve, but he got there, and he is still paired, obviously, with CJ Stroud in the years to come, and Tank Dell's coming off an injury. How good do you feel about Nico Collins for Dynasty going forward? Is this somebody that you're looking for in drafts? Because I feel like right now he still is behind what community consensus should be.
You think so?
I think so, because I think so many people are still infatuated with Tank Dell, and frankly, I think Nico Collins is a better receiver than Tank Dell. But
I agree with you.
Ooh.
So, but
it's always nice.
I think I would rather have Nico if it was a binary. I would rather have Nico than Tank Dell. And I talked about later when we get to the rookies that I kind of had to overcome my size bias with the receivers this year, because basically everyone who did well other than Puka was small. So that's something I'm going to have to deal with going forward. I still think I would rather have Nico, despite the age difference is pretty negligible, right? It's 3 years. Yeah. It's not that big a deal. I just feel more comfortable that he's going to hit free agency at some point earlier. There's a chance that he goes away from Stroud. I don't think that's likely. I think they would probably want to re-sign him, but there's also the talk that mock drafts being what that, I mean, would it be unreasonable for them to take another receiver at their pick? Well,
not at all.
I mean, they've got Cleveland's pick, right? So they're kind of back because they traded their pick to Arizona in the Will Anderson deal.
I'd be shocked if they didn't take a receiver. I mean, you look at this. So, you look at that receiving room. You have Nico Collins, Tank Dell. They're great, but again, Dell coming off an injury. You have Nico Collins entering a contract year, and then you have Robert Woods, who is nothing. And if I don't think he's under contract. Noah Brown, who was a nice fill-in, but that's all he is.
Yeah.
You have 1 year expiring contract right now of Dalton Schultz, who is going to be hitting free agency, and CJ Stroud is going to be moving offenses for the next decade. You already know that he can carry your team. So give him some damn weapons. That's what I think. I would be shocked if they don't take a receiver on day 2, if not earlier.
And if they wait till the second round, like obviously I don't think Bowers is in play for them where they're going to be picking, but
that'd be awesome.
How juicy would Jatavian Sanders be in Houston?
That would be pretty nice. That would be pretty nice. Really, there's not many names you could say, and this speaks to CJ Stroud's brilliance, that insert receiver name here, and you would be so happy with them in Houston.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's going to be one of the better landing spots possible of when we get closer to draft time. But
yeah, I think we need to prepare ourselves for, whatever we think, however we think this is going to play out in the wide receiver rankings of the rookies. If one of them ends up in Houston, they're going to be, they're just going to skyrocket up in value.
Yep.
I mean, they may end up being like the 4th overall rookie wide receivers.
Yeah. And right or wrong,
that's why we don't draft in February.
Yes, that is why we don't draft in February. Now, a few other names on this list. We talked a little bit about DJ Moore. Jalen Waddle coming off a down year despite Tua putting up career numbers. Obviously, Tyreek Hill being up in age, but not close to being done. What's your thought on Jalen Waddle? Because of this group, he almost certainly had the worst 2023 performance.
Yeah, had a lot of injuries, right? So,
yeah.
I think he's a guy that you're going to see. Like, if you want him, he's going to be available. And like I said, you're going to be able to build packages around. I don't think people are I think he took a step down from where he was at this time last year, even though he was, like that game against, was it the Jets? When Tyreek missed and he just blew up. I mean, so yes. he showed that he's got the ability to be kind of that alpha if, even if Tyreek's, or if Tyreek's unavailable, which could happen more. He's getting up there. So these ankle and hamstring injuries that he's kind of dealt with could become more recurring. We'll see. So yeah, he's going to be very interesting. I think he's going to be like I think all these, like I said, all these guys have some sex appeal to their names, but they all maybe have kind of a cap ceiling. So yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of trades with kind of everyone in this tier.
I agree with that. And one quick question before we move on to tier 4, and we could keep it really brief, a yes or no if you want. Does DJ Moore have a better 2024 season with Caleb Williams than he would than he had with Justin Fields in 23? Granted, Fields was hurt, but
I mean, it's still possible that they draft like Marvin Harrison or something like that, right?
Yeah,
that's still got to be considered in play. So
yeah,
or like they could be a landing spot for neighbors or something like that. So I think the likelihood that there's target competition, because he was their entire passing game, him and Cole
they
somehow
have to add people.
I mean, Darnell Mooney's not coming back. So yeah,
Cole Kmet.
I doubt he's as productive next year as he was this year. I think you just have to, statistically, you have to assume that he's not going to be as good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a career year. I've been such a firm DJ Moore believer, but it's hard to do your best and then.
I mean, he basically had an 85th percentile season.
He had a terrific year, despite
he was really good. I mean, it's probably like a 90th percentile season. So
he's awesome. He's awesome.
I just think you just have to probably expect some level of regression.
Yeah, I think that's only fair to do. Let's move on to tier 4 here. The good ones of the 22 class: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, George Pickens, and hold on. You said the good ones of the 2022 class, Joel.
Come on now.
I see Christian Watson's name on this list, and he is not even a top 2 receiver on his own team. Let's start with that one. I said that. I mean it.
Yeah. So let's make this clear. I mean, the hamstring issues are serious concern, right? But he has addressed them. They're actively looking for, he and the team are actively looking for solutions. They talked about kind of building up his back strength so he puts less strain on his hamstrings. So they're actively trying to figure this out. Players his age, they're kind of injury prone until they're not, right? They come into the league, they don't know how to maintain their bodies, they don't know what it takes to get through a full NFL season. And then they do, and then everything's okay. Look at Tua last year, right? With all the concerns about the concussions, he got through one full season, and now that's basically gone, right? So I think big picture here is these guys were all kind of the darlings of the wide receivers last year at this time, and they all kind of took a step back, right? It's Drake London because of the offense he was in. Olave was just good, but not great, had a little bit of injury issues. Garrett Wilson was really good, but the quarterback situation was a disaster. He just couldn't kind of transcend that. and the offense was so bad. But is Aaron Rodgers at 40 years old coming off an Achilles really going to be better than what they had? I mean, he's got to be better than Tim Boyle. I get that, but is he significantly better? Is he a standard deviation better?
Than what they had? Yes. When what they had, yes. Now up to NFL.
Okay,
average,
technically, probably is that a meaningful difference?
He could be the 24th best quarterback, and he could be a step up on what they had. Okay, but I think it's more likely he's around that 18th type of level, and that is more than enough to get Garrett Wilson to a ridiculous season. If we're pivoting off of the Christian Watson talk of that guy who, if he doesn't score a touchdown, is completely useless. But that's just me.
But could score 2 touchdowns.
What's that?
But could score 2 touchdowns.
Could score 2 touchdowns. That's right. And to be fair, that's something.
When Watson was healthy for that 2 weeks, like he was dominant. Like if you look at the KC and Detroit games, he was back to being kind of his dominant level self where he was. So
I mean,
he is still critical to that offense. They will give him every opportunity to heal himself and get himself fully functional. Yeah,
he has 12 touchdowns on just 69 career receptions. That's a very, very good ratio for a receiver, and that's what he does, and he's that big play type of threat. But looking at the rest of this list, we have so much variance of who's throwing the ball. George Pickens, is it Kenny Pickett again? And now that's in a Arthur Smith system. Garrett Wilson is a star, but what do we get with Rodgers? I'm not too worried as long as Rodgers is healthy. You sound a little bit more worried than I am. And then Chris Olave seems to be as safe as it comes for this tier of we know what we have. He's a very good receiver. Derek Carr is average at best, but that's what you get. And Chris Olave dealt with some health issues this year, but he still is going to be very good for the years to come. So of these names, is Garrett Wilson the one you're expecting to take a big jump in 24, or is that Christian Watson, considering you have him here?
Well, I mean, if Watson stays healthy, he will by default take the biggest jump. So I think Wilson, there's a lot of question, right? There's some people who kind of still think he belongs in that second tier, and there's some people who have a lot of questions with him. So that's kind of really that's the whole thing. Like, I still love Drake London, but who's their quarterback? What does that offense look like?
Yeah, I wasn't the biggest Drake London fan, so this is also, it makes it even scarier to me to try to imagine what.
But look he had that 10 catch, 172 yard game. That's his ceiling, man.
That's a great game.
His ceiling is massive. You just need some consistency. And so, what does that quarterback look like? What does that offense look like? So it's got to be better than Arthur Smith, but again, how much better is better?
We do have a question from Easy B from YouTube. Good to see you in the chat, Easy. And I think we have an easy answer for you here. He is debating doing Tank Dell, the high second round pick for CeeDee Lamb. Thoughts in the Superflex Dynasty? Get CeeDee Lamb for that if you can.
If that's all it costs for CeeDee Lamb, I'm smash.
If you can get that, go get CeeDee Lamb. That is a tier 1 wide receiver, as we were talking about before. And when you can get a tier 1 guy, like this price, what would you expect it to cost of Tank Dell and what for CeeDee Lamb? One high first, maybe?
Like Dell, a high second. I still need
a high first and a high second,
something like that. Like, I don't. If you're talking 106.
I think it would have to be like the one.
I think it would have to be like at least 107 and a high second and Tank Dell to get Lamb, at least.
Yeah, so suffice it to say, if you can get CD for this price, shoot for it. And he said he was pushing for a first over second. Was surprised I was that you were overthinking this. I mean, depending on where your first is, you can let us know about that, Easy B, of whether we think that's a good idea. But again, if it's even if like unless it's a top 3 first, I would send it for CeeDee Lamb right here, right? If it was just the pick and Dell for CeeDee Lamb, right, Joel?
Yeah.
He's the 102 and 107, so perfect. If you could send the 107 and Tank for CeeDee Lamb, I would smash that deal for sure.
Yeah, and if you had to throw in a high second, I would still do it.
As would I.
But that's a good starting point. If you offer the 107 and Tank Dell, and they take that, great. If you got to kick in the high second, I'm still doing it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Let's see. Are there any other tier 4 ones we want to talk about here? Because I think we kind of touched on the potential of each of these guys. George Pickens is. I don't know what the hell to do with George Pickens, man. I really don't. I know he's good. I'm just waiting for it to explode in the Steelers' faces.
So
and Arthur
if
Smith
there is
with the fuse.
He's a guy I might go target if there's if there's a lot of negativity about that offense. Just like the contrarian in me says, I mean, he's good enough to transcend that. So I'll take a chance on that. So if his price is depressed because of that, then I'm willing to go kind of make a deal.
The problem is the quarterback hasn't changed. It's still going to be
if it's Pickett, then I'm not. I'm just going to go under the assumption that they have a better quarterback option than that next year.
God bless. Let's move on to tier 5, the they're just so old tier. We talked about this with the running backs, that is not necessarily an insulting phrase, people. This is the people that are just so old, but, some of them are still producing. And that includes Mike Evans coming off another terrific season. Davante Adams, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, and Adam Thielen. What a crazy 2023 that man had.
I debated putting him in this tier, but he was so good this year, you almost have to, right?
Yeah, until Frank Reich got the boot, and then they stopped caring about him. It was a very, very interesting season in Carolina. But which one of these names do you want to start with, Joel?
This big picture, like the running backs, like these are the guys who are going to be the anchors of championship teams. Like, so if you go into a startup, if you can get multiples of these guys in the 5th, 6th round, if everybody's saying, I don't want them because they're old and they're only going to have a year's worth of value max, I'll take them.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that almost sums it up. But the big thing I want to ask you is, I think almost everyone on this list is potentially a free agent, with the exception of probably Cooper Kupp, and then Davante Adams could be traded. So let's go one by one real quick. Is Mike Evans a Buccaneer next season?
Yes.
Okay, I agree with that. Davante Adams, where is he playing football? I say New York. I say he gets traded.
You think so?
I think, and if I don't know if you got a chance to read the Diana Rossini and Zach Rosenblatt report from The Athletic on the Jets.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, what a great read that was. Great report.
I did tweet about the former quarterback of the Packers' influence in that disaster. So
Aaron Rodgers is the general manager of New York. We didn't really need an article to tell us that, but it does further confirm it. And I do think Davante Adams is going to find his way to New York. But
I guess I'm not super well versed on their cap situation. I find it okay. I think it's going to be tougher than that. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's good. We'll see if Vegas wants to do a full rebuild. Are they willing to do that? What if they go out and get a Kirk Cousins? Then they're not giving away.
Yeah, like that would obviously.
If they go sign a veteran quarterback, I mean, it sounds like they're probably not going to go after Fields, since they got Getsy. But if they go after a Kirk Cousins, if they go after, I don't know, Joe Flacco, I don't know who else is out there, but Gardner Minshew. If they sign a veteran like that, then they're probably not going to be down for a rebuild, and they're probably going to want to try and contend. So then I don't see them moving Adams. But so I think that depends on their appetite for a full rebuild.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned at the top of the show of how interesting it is for Las Vegas this offseason. There's so many question marks they get to answer of what direction they want to go in. And obviously Davante Adams is one of those question marks. But Cooper Kupp, coming off a kind of worrisome season, we'll say. Yeah, dealt with some injuries, but really was not the dominant self we thought he would be, and was out-dominated by teammate Puka Nacua. So
still had some very, very elite weeks, though. So
here and there, and he had a lot where he was a surprising no-show, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I'll double check
like the playoffs.
Well, yeah, like the playoffs.
But I still think he's I don't want him as my number 1, but if he's my 3, I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, like you said,
but you don't have to take him as your number 1, right?
No, you do most certainly do not. You can get him as your 3, and I think in a lot of dynasty startups right now, if not potentially later, because people are going to be really, really down on him. But like you said, he still had 5 wide receiver two weeks or better of the games he played, but at the same time, he was also outside the top 40 in 4 or 5 games. So it's worrisome for me, but we'll see. Keenan Allen is a very popular salary cut candidate, like he was last year as well.
Very possible.
So
how does he fit in that offense?
Yeah, doesn't probably. I mean, again,
he could be the Mark Andrews of that offense if they want to bring him back. But I mean, the salary, their cap is a big concern. They've got to do something to address it. I think most of that's going to come on the defensive side, but he's a very possible cap candidate or cap casualty.
Well, let's make the call now. Is Keenan Allen a Charger in 2024?
51% yes.
I'm glad you hedged because that's kind of where I'm at as well. It's just hard to imagine him in a different jersey. I think that's kind of
I agree.
Yep. Someone who spent so long there. But DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a free agent after 1 year with the Titans, and a very curious decision he made to be with the Titans. So what happens with DeAndre Hopkins? It was definitely not the year he was wanting to have or anyone wanted to have with DeAndre Hopkins.
But if he's in Tennessee with an offensive coach, what does that look like? Because it's probably a team that, there's probably gonna be a lot of garbage time opportunities for that team. So
probably.
So I think he's someone who could still be productive.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. That's somebody that I would like to potentially go after and spend something.
And there's no appetite for him in the community, right? Nobody wants him, so you can get him way down in a startup.
Yeah, and Adam Thielen, the last one on this list, I don't expect him to have much left in the tank at this point. I said that last year, but
exactly. And that's why I put him in this tier, because I would have had him as a roster clogger and not even listed him last year, but proved that wrong.
Yeah, yes, he did. It was very good for the first half. Let's move on to tier 6 over here. Not quite so old, but you can see it coming. That's a very good title for people like Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel. And I think with the other thing with all these guys is that you know what you have, right? Yep. Chris Godwin will have you good weeks and he'll have you a few down ones, but relatively safer floor. Amari Cooper can be very up and down. Deontay Johnson is very limited by the system around him. Christian Kirk is a very fine floor play. We know Terry McLaurin's not jumping in the top 5 unless we see maybe a change of situation. And Deebo Samuel is great until he's hurt, and then he's great again. So with all these guys, it's a very interesting tier. So which one of these guys are you most interested in?
So let's start with Godwin. I did some like in the years before last year when Dave Canales came in, he ran about 70% of his routes from the slot. Last year it was like 50%. So what does his route share look like next year with the new coordinator? Because that I always found that very, very strange that they wanted to use him outside that much. So we talked about there's a chance that Mike Evans isn't back, that he's the alpha next year. He could be like a CeeDee Lamb type who could dominate targets from the slot. So I think there's huge upside there. Deontay, I think I'm going to share your trepidation about what that offense is going to look like and how that's going to affect his target potential. Cooper, again, I think is a guy that everyone's hands off, so you can get him very late. And then I like Kirk a lot. Calvin Ridley's going to be a free agent. I can't imagine they bring him back. I think Kirk's going to go back to being kind of old, reliable. I expect them to bring in probably a rookie, but I think Kirk's going to dominate targets there next year. And McLaurin, we'll see what that offense looks like. We'll see what their quarterback is, right? If it's like Drake May, that's a massive step up from Sam Howell, I think.
I don't know about that.
You don't think so?
And my basis for it is that the way they ran that offense last year, and who knows if they do it the same, is Sam Howell dropped back to pass 20 million times a game. And sure, he was sacked for 10 million times a game, but it still resulted in plenty of opportunities for Terry McLaurin, and I don't know if we can possibly see that repeat.
But they weren't good opportunities.
They weren't good opportunities.
They were low-quality opportunities. There were a lot, but they were all low quality.
Washington is going to be able to overcome that?
We'll see. Like I said, we'll see what this offense looks like next year. But I still think he's got we'll talk about Jahan Dotson later in the run screaming, but I still think he's got a chance to be the alpha in that offense. And then Debo's a guy who just produces and nobody wants him.
So, yeah, because people are scared of him missing 3 games a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
But when he's in there, he puts up massive weeks.
He's so important to what the 49ers do.
Yep.
It's so unique to what Shanahan wants to run, and because of that, he's going to keep on being important for fantasy. I'm with you that I think Christian Kirk's the one that I want to be buying the most of this bunch. I think he's going to be very solid flex play, low-end wide receiver 2 next season, and that's somebody that I want on my rosters that I can buy as a wide receiver 3 and potentially, sell the idea of him just being an afterthought in an offense despite being paid a lot of money and performing while he's been out there. So I like Christian Kirk there. Are there anything else you want to dive into with this one before we jump to tier 7? Just because I want to try to touch on every tier we can.
No, it's just good. These are guys who, like, the community is going to be kind of down on them, but they still have elite target potential in their offenses next year, assuming things go the way we expect them to.
Yes, sir. Let's move on to tier 7 here. The 2023 rookies who didn't embarrass themselves, non-Puka division. That's Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, Demario Douglas, Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Dontavian Wicks, and Michael Wilson. That last name, Michael Wilson, had a very quietly solid end to the rookie season and definitely stands out at his size as really the only big receiver Arizona has, too.
Yeah, had a couple smash games, but dealt with a lot of injuries. But I think all these, the theme with these guys is they all did enough in their rookie season to kind of break that threshold of, you have to do something in your rookie season for us to be interested in you. Kind of the Henry Ruggs rule, right? Who did
Jonathan Mingo rule.
Yeah, I don't expect any of them to kill anyone in a car crash and a drunk driving car crash, but like Henry Ruggs is the kind of classic example of someone who did nothing in their rookie year, and we should have just ignore the draft capital, just move away, get off. These guys kind of all exceeded that threshold, and so I'm not running away from any of these guys, unlike kind of the next tier.
Yeah, and we've talked about Tank Dell. I think Jordan Addison, we know what the situation is. He'll be good with Justin Jefferson next to him, but we don't know who's throwing the ball. We'll find that out. But the 2 names that really stand out to me, Demario Douglas and Rashee Rice. Because Rashee Rice has been sensational for maybe not sensational, but very good for the Chiefs over the last month, and being the only receiver to really step up with that room. And Demario Douglas kind of playing a similar role despite horrific circumstances in New England of actually being the one and stepping into a Jacoby Myers type of role. So I'm curious on both those guys on your takes and how you think they could perform in 2024.
I think Douglas is really kind of underrated because like when he was healthy, I mean, he had a concussion late in the year that kind of cost him some time, and the offense was just non-functional for the most part, especially in the passing game. But I mean, when he was out there and healthy, he was kind of like he was the alpha on that team, right? It wasn't Juju, it wasn't Devontae Parker, it wasn't Kendrick Bourne,
Hunter Henry.
Yeah, he was the number one guy. So didn't produce a ton, but I think we saw that the fact that he was the number one guy when he was out there makes me comfortable not dismissing him. And Rashee Rice, is he top 15 dynasty receiver?
That's a little rich, but it's close. Like
he's got to be close. I think he's easily top 20.
Close. He's definitely in the top 20 because, I mean, he's drawing targets, man, and he's performing. And we know he's entering next year as at least the wide receiver 2 and very likely the wide receiver 1.
I was going to say, there's a non-zero chance that they like address offensive line with their early picks and don't take a receiver and don't sign a receiver because their cap is tight, and they go back, they rerun it with Rashee Rice as the number 1 and utilize properly, which he was not early in the season. And Kelsey comes back and that's their offense again. It's done pretty well in the playoffs.
Yeah. They've showed over an expanded sample size that they don't need a alpha wide receiver 1 to get to the Super Bowl. So,
but I think this is where like people are going to have that bias, right? Because it was built in during the season that, they need an alpha. They need, because they struggled so much kind of down the stretch with MVS and, the Philly game where they dropped all those passes, the Raider game where they couldn't get their offense going. I think that bias is, they need somebody. They need somebody. There's a very good chance it just doesn't happen, that they kind of rerun it with what they have.
Yeah, I think that's very possible because we've seen them do that already, and it keeps working. Maybe that changes if they view
And if
Travis
they
Kelce as
do,
a declining asset, but
then I think Rice is a top 15 dynasty receiver.
yeah, I mean, especially if we continue to see Travis Kelce's role decline a little bit, that only means more targets for Rashee Rice because, well, yeah, okay. I'm saying if
Heresy.
capital I. Let's move on to tier 8 here. A lot of good names there in that tier. Just guys, a very kind term and fairly fitting, I will say. Romeo Doubs with the Packers, Jacoby Myers, Josh Palmer, Wandell Robinson, Rashid Shaheed, and Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is that toxic ex-girlfriend of mine, man. I can't quit him. Every time I quit him, he gives me one more reason to believe. And it's so frustrating. Because it's never when I want to play him or whenever I did play him. You're right. I know you're right. I know he's bad for me. I just
Yeah, this is the just barely above roster clogger tier.
flex.
Anything happens.
Flex potential depending on situation.
Correct. Yes. That's as much as I'm going to say. These guys who barely qualified to make the article.
The only thing I will say here, because I think that fits for a lot of these guys, of they had weeks they were fine, they had weeks they were bad, and you could kind of see most of them coming. But Romeo Doubs is really the one person that really took off towards the back half of the season and in the playoffs of really stepping up. I'd want to confirm that you, as Mr. Packer, are viewing him as just a guy. And I mean, obviously, you're a Christian Watson guy. I think Doubs is better than Watson, but that's more your thing.
So here's my big picture concern with the skill players on this offense is the way they won kind of down the stretch. And I've made this point before, they're like a baseball team with a great bullpen, right? They shorten the game. They want to keep you to 6, 7, 8 possessions, and because they're so efficient with the, doing the matriculating thing. They're good on first down. They're good on second down. They put themselves in, they keep themselves out of third and long situations. They're probably going to have to be like a 60 touchdown offense to kind of support all their skill players. So that's why I'm on a weekly basis, right? So I think you're going to have some week to week concerns on the floors of these guys. And we saw it in the playoffs with Jaden Reed, right? As much as we like him, didn't do anything against Dallas and they still put up 40, whatever. So
yeah, they basically decoyed.
There's going to be weeks where these guys just kind of floor on you just because someone else does it. So I don't know if Doubs is as good as he was down the stretch. I don't think he's talented enough to kind of be a target hoarder in an offense like this with as much skill talent as they have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a super spreader offense. It's going to be kind of terrifying to own anyone not named Jordan Love, or I expect Aaron Jones to be the kind of back, and to get a decent, just their weekly floor with these guys is going to be so scary.
Yeah. He'll have, it almost feels like this class is Marvin Jones of there are going to be good weeks. There are going to be bad weeks. If he catches a touchdown, great. Some weeks it's just not going to work because it goes to AJ Green or whoever else he's on the team with at that time.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know if that's perfect, but either way, just guys kind of fits that tier very well. Let's move on to tier 9. Don't go into the light, Carol Lamb. Oh, you're getting poetic and fantastic here. Elijah Moore, Jameson Williams, Jahan Dotson, Traylon Burks. I'm going into the light. Jalen Hyatt, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, and Jonathan Mingo. Don't put Traylon Burks in this tier, man. He hasn't had a chance. He hasn't
had a chance. He's had 2 years.
He's been hurt. It's been nonstop concussions. Every time he does something well, he gets speared in the head. It's not fair.
It's not fair, but I mean, we talked about that threshold, and these are guys who have had opportunities and just have not exceeded that threshold. Yeah. So these are the guys you're going to see a lot of trade baits that say, that have these guys on it. I'm not falling for it. I'm not giving up anything for any of these guys.
Yeah,
I just saw one that just came across Traylon Burks for a second. I laughed out loud. Who's giving up a second for Traylon Burks right now? If you had the 212, would you give that for Traylon Burks?
I could be talked into sending a late second for him.
Okay.
I probably won't because I know at the end of the day I know he's bad for me. But I don't blame him. I think it's been so unlucky, and when he's been out there, he's had good games, he's had good moments, and he had that amazing play against the Bills, and then they just had to spear him. So I don't know. It's also hard for me to buy into Tennessee producing enough on offense to warrant Traylon Burks making the step that he needs to make to stay in relevance. So it's I think my fear of Tennessee overweighs my love of Traylon Burks, but I'm 100% with you on the rest of these guys. I think a lot of people want Marvin Mims to be more, and he certainly could be in year two. It was always going to be a very quiet rookie year, but he definitely disappointed at times. There were definitely times
he couldn't get on the field.
Yeah,
right?
there were times he stepped up and
that's the really scary that he could not get on the field.
Brandon
For a
Johnson.
team that, this isn't exactly, this isn't Seattle with JSN and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett ahead of him. This is not a great Judy and Sutton don't even make this article because I think they're roster cloggers. They're not elite players at all. Like, he could not get on the field. So, I mean, he was a second round pick. He went ahead of Jaden Reed. That's terrifying. Like, they put a lot of draft capital in him and he could not get on the field. That's bad.
Yeah, that it is. Everything would suggest like this. It is the exact situation, like you said, of everything suggests that this is not going to work out. And the only reason we think otherwise is because we liked him as prospects.
They have to be outliers at this point. They have to be outliers to be successful going forward.
Yes. And that's where I am with Elijah Moore. I love Elijah Moore, but
it's time to move on.
I have to acknowledge that this is just really not looking good. Easy also bringing up in the chat saying he has Dotson, don't know what they'll do with him. You and everyone else out there, man. And he's let the Burks train pass it, giving up hope on that guy. Yeah, you let the train pass, and then it ran over me on the tracks. It's just heartbreaking easy, I got to say. But with Dotson, he is very much a roster clogger, right? Because you feel like you can't get rid of him. He's a first-round caliber guy. He's only in his third season, but it's a new regime. You probably still have Terry McLaurin, and he hasn't done all that much. So.
He's a roster clogger who still has a pocket of supporters. So if you can find them, that's where if you can get a second for him, you smash that. If you can, once we get to draft day, I'm spamming him for a third.
Or, I mean, what I try to do a lot in the offseason is I try packaging it of, can I send Jahan Dotson and a third for a late second? I can move up 12 spots by draft for Jahan Dotson. Why not? I free up a roster space while doing so as well. So those are the type of things you could try to pull with these guys. Some of them have more value than other. I think James and Williams could be a terrific sell candidate of someone that I don't believe in, just like you don't believe in. But he's on the Lions, and he made one or two good plays over the last month.
Jameson Williams is skinny Will Fuller.
Will Fuller was pretty skinny.
Okay, skinny and shorter Will Fuller.
There we go.
Faster, skinnier, shorter Will Fuller.
If Will Fuller wasn't skinny, then he would have stayed on the field. God. Will Fuller. What a guy. What a guy. Let's move on to tier 10, the last one here. The landing spot tier, which again we talked about in the past with a few of the other positions, especially running back. But this one: Marquise Brown, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Tyler Lockett, Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley, Mike Williams. All of these guys, as you wrote in the article, are either free agents or capped casualties, or likely capped casualties, and could have probably thrown a couple names that we already talked about on this list too. But of these guys, Stephon Diggs, there are already more rumblings in the last week of he's not happy in Buffalo. He's coming off a down year where he was really an afterthought over the back half of the season once they switched coordinators. It's been heading for a breakup for over a year now with Stephon Diggs. Do you think this is the offseason where it happens?
I'm just looking. I think his cap hit is like $34 million or something.
Oh, it's a restructure or cut situation for sure. Or trade, I guess.
Cap number for 24. Okay, 27.8.
That's he's not playing on that contract. No way.
For the production that he's given you and the disappearing act he's done the last 2 years at the end of the season in the playoffs. I can't imagine the way the kind of relationship seems on the outside. I can't imagine they're going to come to a middle ground on what his salary should be. So I fully expect him to be somewhere else. And if he's not with Josh Allen, good luck. Hollywood Brown is really interesting because there's so few comps for him, like historically. Someone his size, his ability, his situation. So he's going to be very situationally dependent on where he goes. T. Higgins, I think everyone just assumes he's going to Carolina. I still think there's a pretty good chance he gets franchised and stays in Cincinnati, but to be determined. So very much a question mark. Lockett, I think, is gone from Seattle. He's got a huge cap hit as well. I don't think they can bring him back. Pittman's the guy I really like out of this tier because I expect he will probably be franchised as well and probably end up back with Anthony Richardson and Syke in Indianapolis. I kind of struggle to see them letting him go. So for a franchise tag, there's a good chance he may get re-signed as well. So Ridley's going to be interesting. Mike Williams is probably dead. I don't think he has really any dynasty value coming off the ACL, even though it was early in the season. He's almost certainly gone. He's going to be a cap casualty. So where does he end up? If this is a typical coming off an ACL kind of down season for him, he's not very good. So I just don't think he has any dynasty value, but he could end up somewhere. He could go to a good spot. It's possible.
Buffalo.
It's possible. I don't have much hope for him, but there are landing spots like that would make sense for him and could kind of he could see a short-term bump just because of where he signs and offer you a window to sell. And if that happens, I'm moving him.
Hey Joel, what about Gabe Davis? He's a free agent.
Gabe Davis did not make the list because Gabe Davis is a roster clogger.
Yeah, fair enough.
So conspicuous by their absence, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Gabe Davis, all roster cloggers. I have zero interest in carrying those guys over to next year. Whatever I can get for them on draft day, just spam them for a third.
Fair enough. I'm going to run through and make my predictions as well, and then we'll wrap it on up here. Marquise Brown, I do think he'll come back to the Cardinals. I think that Kyler Murray connection is still building because of the missed time, and they gave up a first to get him. And I still, like you, I love what Marquise Brown does as a very unique type of profile. Stephon Diggs feels like this year's DeAndre Hopkins, of the guy that once he gets released or gets whatever happens, people are going to expect him to have a massive market, and I think we are going to be shocked by the lack of interest. And he'll find a spot somewhere. He'll play football in 24. But it was bad. He did not play well. He was taken out of the picture in the playoffs. And there's reasons for concern. And you also have the character concerns and everything like that. T. Higgins, I'm with you that I've been on the Carolina train for T. Higgins so long that it feels like now that everyone's caught up, I want to pivot off of it because it just feels too easy now. But we'll see. I think he's the most up in the air of where he ends up of everyone on this list, honestly. Tyler Lockett, no clue. Hopefully he gets an Adam Thielen role. Michael Pittman, I would be floored if the Colts don't tag and extend him, because we really need to remember of how great Michael Pittman was with Anthony Richardson and just in general this season, despite very difficult circumstances. I love Michael Pittman, always have and always will. Calvin Ridley, I'm giving him one more chance. I'm giving him one more chance. Okay. Maybe I'm too forgiving, Joel. Maybe that's what I'm learning about myself on this show. But he had 2 years off of football. He had a year. He had some good spots at the end of the year. I'm hoping that he can get back to form next season, possibly with some extra help. I don't know if that's with Jacksonville. I hope it is. I hope he gets a chance to run it back, but we'll see. And like you, Mike Williams is a very talented receiver who can't stay on the field and is now coming off an ACL tear. So that seems difficult to overcome, but let's just quickly plant our flag here. Which one of these guys, of all of them, choose one and choose the best possible landing spot for them. Where would you, if you had to pick one of these guys to put in one team, where would he go?
It's got to be Higgins back in Cincinnati, right?
Probably, yeah. Did I say Higgins in Houston? Higgins on one
That would
side,
be
Neal on
interesting.
the other side, and Dell in the slot.
If he does not get tagged, if he does become a free agent, is anybody outbidding Carolina for him? I think that's really binary. I think it's either Cincinnati or Carolina.
Yeah,
I think he's going to go back to Cincy, and Ridley becomes the Carolina option.
Oh God, that'll be a heart wrestle for me if Ridley's in Carolina.
Okay, what about this? What if Diggs gets cut, Ridley doesn't go back to Jacksonville, and Carolina signs them both?
I'll be buying Bryce Young, man.
I know, right?
That's what I'll be doing, because I'm not out on Bryce Young. And we talked about that on the quarterback show, which again, be sure to check out. Check out all those shows on Club Fantasy FFL here on the YouTube. I'm not out on Bryce Young.
Idea.
What's that?
Easy's idea in the chat.
Yeah, Easy's got an idea.
That makes some sense.
Diggs to Dallas, connect the Diggs brother. Yeah, 1-on-1 each side of the ball. CeeDee Lamb on the inside.
I mean, we talked about that a couple of years ago when there was no chance he was getting cut by Buffalo. Now I think that's likely that he gets cut. So yeah, that could be interesting.
Yeah, that would be fun. And you got to imagine Dallas would pick up the phone at least. Although Mike McCarthy and Stephon Diggs feels like an explosion waiting to happen. Who knows? Maybe
that does feel oil and water-ish.
Yeah, but you know what? We could say that about a lot of people with Stephon Diggs.
I mean, it was with Sean McDermott too. So
yeah, pretty much. So either way, that wraps up our Joel's wide receiver tiers. He wrote a fantastic article you should make sure you check out at clubfantasyfl.com to check out all the tiers that we just went through. Give it a read yourself, get a scan, and be sure to let us know in the comments, Twitter, whatever you want to do, to let us know what you think. Give Joel some love, give me some hate. You know how it goes. And with that in mind, be sure to follow.
That would be undeserved.
Yeah, exactly. It would be unprecedented, obviously. And of course, be sure to follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. Thank you, Easy, for tuning in as well. Thanks for the stream, man. Always good to see people in our chat. So hopefully we see you next week on Sunday. If I'm here, either way, if Joel's here, we'll figure it out. But we'll be here as a show on the Dynasty After Party. You can follow myself at Michael__Sicoli. And of course, you can follow Club Fantasy FFL at Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter. And hit a follow, hit the subscribe, all that amazing content you'll be able to see, get updates on when it comes out. No cost to you, just a little bit of following, which we all like to do. So, with that said, thank you all for tuning in to this week. Next week is Super Bowl Sunday. Let us drop some predictions in the comments if you want. Tell us who you think's going to win. Give me some score predictions. It'll be fun. Chiefs. I'm gonna go Chiefs 24-21. It's a close one. Just because I don't know if I'm going to be here next week.
Chiefs 30-23.
30 points. Yeah. See, I see a lot of people predicting a high-scoring game, and I find that very interesting. And I get it. I get it, Joel. I do. Either way, that wraps up our show. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to give follows to everything I just said before. And remember, Dynasty, it's like a disco ball. Keeps on going year-round. So join the club every Sunday, now at 1 p.m., Throughout this offseason, we're going to keep on bringing you guys coaching updates, free agency updates, combine updates, whatever comes our way in the Dynasty Circle. We are here for you. Have a good week. Have a good Sunday, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.